Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am very excited to be hosting this webinar on libraries of the future, which is one of the hot topics at the moment, certainly with all of the new technologies coming in and a lot of the new things that are actually appearing in the landscape of librarianship and how libraries can support research, education, and academia in general. So we are connecting a couple of minutes before the start of the webinar to allow everybody to come on board and actually join us. Grab a glass of water if you need it. It's going to be a 45-minute session where we're going to delve into this topic together with our guest speaker today. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. There is a chat box there together with a Q&A box. Please use it. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to hear your voice as well. We're here to understand how this conversation can continue and can expand throughout the community. So if you've got any questions, any ideas you would like to share, please use those two boxes. They're there for you to ignite the conversation and get it going. Nothing else on my end, and I would actually like to start introducing today's topic. So libraries of the future might be a bit broad, might seem a little bit broad, and it's definitely a challenge to think about. What does the library of the future look like? It's something that a librarian would ask themselves. And I imagine when a few of us started working in this field, it might have been unimaginable to conceive what actually happened over the years. However, libraries have always been at the forefront of innovation, one way or another. When the pandemic started, many of the tools that got implemented by academia had already been implemented by libraries. And there's definitely some leitmotif, something that carries through years and years and years that librarians have learned to implement. So today, I have asked our guest speaker, Erin Ellis, from Indiana University Bloomington, to join us and guide us through this conversation with some examples, something from her experience, and some insights into what a library could look like in the future. She is the Associate Dean for Organizational Strategy and Scholarly Communication at the University of Indiana University of Bloomington, and she's also an Associate Librarian. So without further ado, we will hear from Erin, who's going to give us a presentation, and then we're going to move on to questions and answers at the end of the session. So Erin, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alice. Just give me 2 seconds here so I can transition to my slides and get to my view. Okay.
Perfect. I can see everything.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks again so much to you and to Joe for the invitation to talk with you all today. It's a real privilege. So I'm happy to be here. This is a topic I always take the opportunity to talk about. There's so much to talk about, and there's so much exciting thing. There's so many exciting things to talk about. So I really like talking about academic libraries, imagining our future, the future of our work within the higher education context as that continues to evolve, and the future of our profession, the many ways that we have and will continue to transform. So I like to think about this stuff. I like to think about the ways we can strategically prepare for and also influence those futures. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you find a thing or two to take from this time that's valuable or useful. So to start, I want to ask you all to think a little bit about the last time you and your organization felt situated comfortably with your campus, with your leadership, your administrators, your budget, content with your position on your institutional campus or wherever you are, and comfortable with how you participate and contribute to your institution's research and learning endeavors. Do you and your colleagues feel prepared with the necessary resources, with the necessary budget, with the staff, the expertise? Now, maybe some of you are in enviable situations and you're feeling prepared. You've got what you need. You're in a good spot. But I'd venture to say that many of us have not felt altogether comfortable or prepared. And maybe for some, that's just been in the recent years, but maybe for some, it's been your whole career. So I wanted to give just a little bit of context of where I am and what I've done and where I've been to frame a little bit of where we're going in this conversation. So I've been a librarian for 22 years, amazing, working in large public state university libraries here in the United States. And I've spent my career in the public facing services, reference instruction, that type of thing. And I've been working in administration as an associate dean for 11 years. And I have experienced both stability and comfort across the institutions I've worked at, and also a lot of instability and adversity. And when I was in graduate school, I remember a lot of talk about the paradigm shift that libraries were in or were facing and experiencing. Just for context, when I was in graduate school, Internet Explorer was becoming the most accessible and popular web browser because it was becoming more available on desktop PCs. It was coming preloaded on those things. So just to give you a slice of where I was 22 years ago. But I remember we were asking ourselves, what are libraries now that there's a world of information at everyone's fingertips? And what did the World Wide Web mean for academic library services? How was this going to change the way we supported students and provided resources? How were we going to manage access to all these newly available online databases? And we were really concerned about all of the misinformation that was probably going to be out there, and how were our students going to be able to separate the fact from the fiction? Some of you may also remember that around that time, information literacy instruction really started to take hold and take off. And it was in the year 2000 that the Association of College and Research Libraries approved the standards for information literacy. So I've been thinking about, and I want you to think a little bit about how much change you've experienced in your career, or how much librarianship has transformed, and how often in that time has the demise and marginalization of libraries been predicted? How often has it been declared that libraries were in or were facing a crisis? In a word, I'd say that's happened often. But libraries and library workers have proven to be exceedingly agile and exceptionally capable of reinventing our work, how we work, what we do, what we provide, where we do it. We've done this by reshaping and redefining services, establishing new roles and functions, successfully transforming organizationally. We've established new and innovative ways of contributing through and to new technology and new expectations. I'm sorry, I've got to catch up with some notes. And we've consistently demonstrated our value. We've transformed ourselves from information and service providers, from repositories of books and printed materials, to full research partners and facilitators in the production of scholarship. So when it comes to responding to challenges, seizing opportunities, and adapting, we've done that. Part of our continued ability to do that and to be prepared for the future is to remember that we've done this time and time again, that we can and will continue to successfully adapt to change. We will continue to find ways to align with our institutional priorities. We've taken new pressures and some of the expected and unexpected changes we've seen completely in stride. We've adapted and evolved amidst increasing complexity in higher education. We've done it through new modes of conducting research and producing scholarship, and amidst political and technical disruptions. We've met these challenges and these crises, and we've leveraged the opportunities they bring. Now, I have to say, thanks to our host, Alice, I understand that the origin of the word crisis is in the ancient Greek when it was used to refer to a turning point. And I loved this because we have faced many of these crises, right? Many turning points, certainly in the last couple of decades, dealing with uncertain and reduced budgets and staffing, the incredible pace of development with technology, the day-to-day reality we all face with the pandemic and its ongoing resulting impacts. Some of these are pressures and challenges that have persisted or have evolved as sort of variations on a theme. I know the concerns about student information literacy and distinguishing fact from fiction remains a theme for many librarians. Technology is probably the most persistent theme that has changed nearly everything we do and has changed the expectations of our researchers and learners. The development and availability of technology is coming faster and faster with no signs of slowing. But we have consistently found ways to leverage it. By we've used it to increase the availability of resources through digitization. We've made tools, content, and research support more accessible and discoverable. We've developed a wide variety of instructional videos and modules for on-demand use and course integration. We can connect and communicate with each other and our constituencies more efficiently, and we can meet our communities virtually anywhere. We've successfully applied technology solutions to build institutional repositories, improve preservation work, and develop increasingly rich and robust catalogs. The influence and impact of technology will continue to grow. But I say all this so that we can remember that libraries have had considerable success in integrating and leveraging technology, and we will continue to find those opportunities. Consider how much has changed because of technology and how much technology has changed in the last 20, 10, even 5 and 3 years. How many of us were thinking about artificial intelligence a couple of years ago? Consider the solutions and the infrastructure that libraries have been able to develop and even lead the way in. We've done this. Now, how to keep doing it? We have to stay aware, informed, engaged, and visible. This is fundamental, and I will return to this again. We may not be able to predict the future, but we can position the library in ways that helps us to see around corners. We know that change is constant. The pace isn't likely to let up. We know higher education is changing. Students are changing. Researcher needs and practices are changing. If you don't know how that's happening on your campus, you're not engaged and aware enough. We have to be attentive to new and emerging priorities and trends in higher education and in our local contexts. This is essential for us. Libraries that are aware, engaged, and visible can better spot and anticipate what's coming next and are better prepared to respond and pivot and evolve. So don't skip reading whatever your higher education news sources are. For me, the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed are two places I look at every day. I also do not ignore the latest news and messages that come from my campus's leadership offices, research, and education offices. They give me insight into what's happening on my campus. It helps me understand what my campus leaders are paying attention to and what they are considering. So for some of us in the United States, for example, if you're at a public institution, your leaders are probably thinking about the state board of regents or board of trustees, whatever they happen to be called. Maybe they're thinking at your institution about aspirational peers and where they'd like to be as an institution. Maybe they're thinking about how to grow their external funding, and so they're looking at funding agencies more closely. Know this, be aware of this. Also, get familiar with and stay attuned to where resources are going on your campus. Which departments are seeing growth in student enrollment? Which are seeing growth in their faculty? What areas of operations are growing? What spaces are being created? What technical infrastructure is developing? Where do you see staffing increasing? That's going to give you insight in the libraries as to priorities. Go to the meetings, go to the presentations, the town halls, the open fora. Know what your campus communities are talking about, what they're asking about, what they're struggling with, and what they're making progress toward. Strategically situate regular library representation in these spaces and establish the library voice in these conversations. This is going to provide the library's critical insight and information to strategically prepare and pivot. It will also give you information that may reveal opportunities for the library. At a minimum, you'll be able to better anticipate and prepare for what's coming next on your campus. But even better, it may position you to be in the places that the libraries can influence and create what's coming next. So make it a priority to be visible and engaged on your campus. We know that a sit back and wait for them to come to us approach isn't going to work. The priorities of your institution are the priorities of the library. And libraries should take every opportunity to demonstrate that and understand that. Let your campus community see that the libraries are strategically significant, are engaged contributors, and add significant value to the research and learning enterprises. You'll ensure that the libraries aren't forgotten in decision-making, and you'll build a huge network of advocates in the process. Libraries also need to know and embrace the expertise within their organization, and they have to communicate it emphatically. The people in our libraries know a lot, and they know how to do a lot of things. Unfortunately, this is often one of the best kept secrets on our campuses, and that can really cost us. The centuries-old perceptions of libraries and the librarian stereotypes continue to work against many of us. But we also kind of keep our expertise and our efforts too quiet sometimes, not to mention the ways our profession and our work have evolved. So I'm going to pose a few questions, scenario questions kind of things to you that reflect work that, in my experience, has been kept too quiet. So think about, in your context, how many of your researchers know the extent of your library's work to make the scholarly communication ecosystem more equitable and accessible? How many of them understand the expertise you've developed to negotiate agreements with publishers to have work published more openly accessible? Or how many of them understand or know about the systems you've built or maintain access to in order to disseminate their work as broadly as possible and preserve it? How many of your campus leaders understand how integral your library is to the institution's research enterprise and infrastructure? The data sets that you purchase or license, for example, the research data management and preservation support you provide, the library workers who ensure compliance with the university open access policy, and that make sure that research products are available in the institutional repository. How many faculty, students, and their supporting families are aware of how much you're saving students through identifying or helping to create openly accessible resources? How many ebooks you're licensing for courses or other affordable course materials that you're packaging for students and their coursework? How much do they know about what the library contributes to a student's ability to persist and graduate on time through this kind of work? These are just a few examples of my personal experience of where we've been too quiet about what we're doing. Our contributions, whether it's behind the scenes through technology and software or more front of the house directly through instruction and research consultations, these are meaningful ways that enable our students' success and our researchers' productivity. We have to communicate it. We have to make these successes, these contributions, and the talents and expertise in the library visible. We have to be forthright, and we have to assert how the library can and does contribute to campus goals and priorities. We must also communicate clearly about the impacts and implications of not including the library's expertise in decisions. I have a recent example for this. My university was investigating a new faculty annual review system, a new platform for this. Now, the libraries here have a huge stake in any changes to this kind of system because we rely on it to comply with our open access policy. So we communicated with several individuals who were involved in the decision-making and asserted the library's needs with such a system, the selection of which would have considerable implications for how we do our open access work. Now, fortunately, we communicated soon enough to inform people about how a new system would impact that work. But we also realized in that the library's work in this regard had unfortunately been too invisible. They hadn't even thought of the libraries when their investigation began. It was an important reminder of how critical it is to regularly share compelling stories and data that makes the library's value and contributions visible. As an integral part of the campus community, libraries also have to be upfront about the challenges that reduce or prevent the library's ability to support the campus. So another example that maybe some of you can relate to is the challenge that some libraries have been dealing with for many years in terms of flat collections budgets and the inability to keep pace with inflation and the rising cost of scholarship. So one of my previous institutions, we worked really hard to absorb these costs. We nipped where we could. We cut resources where we thought it would be least noticeable. And essentially, we were able to keep quiet for a long time what we were dealing with, which was and continues to be a crisis. But when the library finally reached a point where it wasn't going to be quiet, it couldn't go unnoticed anymore, there was shock and misunderstanding amongst some of our faculty about what was happening and why. We had not been communicating emphatically about what was going on and what we were doing to try to ease the situation. And we had some costs to us keeping that quiet. We had a lot of conversations with faculty who had to kind of be brought up to speed with the state of affairs with our collections budget. So I want to urge you, in order to get and stay ready for the future, to take steps so that you and your campus constituencies aren't caught unaware or flat-footed. We have to know internally and communicate and embrace the value of our work. We have to embrace the fact that we possess valuable and often unique expertise on our campuses, and that we can contribute in ways that others can't. We have to communicate and assert this emphatically. Keeping quiet about this is going to have costs. Just like there are costs of being unengaged or costs of being unengaged and invisible. We'll lose opportunities. Our campus will lose opportunities. And the library's value and relevance may be eroded. But by embracing and emphatically communicating our expertise, there are going to be fewer surprises, more opportunities, and better outcomes all around. The library is uniquely positioned to do many things that advance our institutional missions. As long as information abounds, there will always be a need for libraries to support its discovery, evaluation, use, analysis, and preservation. A sip of water. In order for libraries to be successful and ready for the future, we also have to be committed to professional learning and organizational growth. Remember again the fundamental that I started with. To know where professional learning needs have to be developed and to know how your organization needs to grow, you first have to be aware and engaged in your context. Awareness and engagement is going to help the library understand the value and scope of its organizational expertise and where its gaps are. Now, I'd wager that no one here graduated possessing all the knowledge and skills that they currently have or need today. Our practices and skills have changed because we've experienced decades of change, and there's more to come. So if we aren't committed to continual learning for ourselves and our colleagues in the library, we won't be prepared to innovate or ready to proactively and strategically implement initiatives that advance our institutional missions. So commit to continually building the practical skills and tools that are needed in the library. Stay up to date with emerging technology as it applies to the day-to-day work in your organization, but also as it applies to the work of our students and researchers. How are they using these tools? Commit also to professional reflection. Communities of practice and professional networks are invaluable for this and for helping us come together to identify best practices. When you're wondering, is there a better way to do this? Am I reinventing the wheel? Who's already doing this, or who's done this already? How are other libraries grappling with this? Who can share some experience? That is when that community and that network is so essential. And I'd say I almost got away with not mentioning AI too much in this talk, and I'm not going to talk about much in regards to AI, but AI is a really good example of this right now. Across our professional networks and communities, we're sharing all kinds of information. We're talking about our approaches and what's happening on our campuses and considering how or if our organizations are prepared. Can we proceed in this area? What do we still have to learn and know in order to do anything in this regard? Academic librarians are a fantastic group to call on. And I think many of us who worked through the pandemic realized this if we hadn't already. We were facing so many similar challenges and questions, and we were seeking each other out and discovering all these new ways of working, ways that in some cases we previously thought weren't possible. I was so impressed with the way this community supported each other as we all adjusted and responded to those unprecedented circumstances. So find your community, use that community, call on your network. I think the future of libraries is going to depend on that community and what we can do together and as a collective. Also, commit to your continual organizational growth. Know your and your library's strengths, where there are gaps in expertise, as well as where the strengths and gaps are in your library's organizational effectiveness and culture. Organizational growth includes knowing when it's time to stop doing something. And I know this is such a hard thing for so many of our organizations to do. But we have to know when it's time to stop doing something in order to start something new or adapt something. A library that's committed to organizational growth will be ready and able to do that and to decide what to sunset, deprioritize, and will also be able to activate some exit strategies when they need to adapt or pivot. Organizational growth means continually assessing and building capacity to meet the emerging institutional priorities and environmental changes on your campus, which, again, you are aware of because of, remember, fundamentally, you are aware and engaged and visible. Organizational growth also requires attentiveness to and addressing needs and issues in the culture. A common need amongst many libraries is not only the need to diversify our collections, but undertake an honest assessment of the diversity, equity, and inclusion of our organization's policies, practices, and structures. Libraries that don't commit to diversifying their organizations, creating more equitable organizations, and creating more inclusive organizations, I feel do so at their peril. Any professional learning or organizational growth that doesn't acknowledge and include efforts to deconstruct inequitable and racist systems are less likely to successfully meet the challenges ahead, less likely to successfully adapt to rapid change in higher education and academic librarianship, and will disadvantage themselves in developing meaningful relationships and partnerships. And disadvantage themselves in creating innovative tools and solutions that foster our campus research and learning initiatives. So if you're thinking, well, that all sounds well and good, easier said than done, easy for you to say, let me close by saying I am no Pollyanna. I'm not wearing rose-tinted glasses, and I don't work in this enviably ideal organization. But I will say that I am confident, and this is why I enjoy talking about this so much. I am confident that academic libraries can be influential and can shape the changes that are ahead and can remain or even increase our relevance as the future unfolds. We do and will continue to have critical contributions to make. I'm also comfortable in times of uncertainty and ambiguity and crisis, because these truly are turning points. This is where new opportunity and directions are revealed for us, and innovation, creativity, and transformation can occur. I'm confident that academic libraries of the future will find success as valued partners and colleagues if we remember that we are adaptable, agile, and able to effectively reinvent our work. We see pressure, change, and complexity as opportunity. We embrace our expertise and communicate it emphatically. We commit to continual professional learning and organizational growth. We are attentive to new and emerging trends and priorities in higher education and our local contexts. And we share compelling stories and data that makes our value, contributions, and challenges visible. So let's be confident about this together and embrace change and every turning point as an opportunity to show that we're prepared and ready for whatever comes next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. I know it's always quiet when you finish a presentation, but I wanted to clap because it was honestly so insightful, and some people are already commenting on it in the chat. I think you shared with us some really, really good key features of what a person working in the sector should keep in mind, especially the confidence and what you said about being able to see change as an opportunity. I know we discussed this word crisis, and I think it's something that we should always remember. We're in a profession where change is good, and it's hard to conceive change as something good, as a force for good, but it's the essence of what we do. So before we move on to somebody raised their hand and maybe some live questions, I'd like to ask a couple of questions that came about just before we started the webinar. So one is about new technologies, and I would like to frame it in a way that also makes us think of practical examples. So obviously at Jove we have a video library. So I remember a few years ago, videos were somehow a new technology, and I remember librarians being a little bit scared and saying, oh, I don't really know how to propose a library that is only made of videos. And when the pandemic came about, they were at the forefront of that. They knew exactly how to do that, and the people who were not capable of implementing these things were those who in theory should have been much more prepared, and instead librarians were prepared. They had face the challenge of a new technology much earlier than anybody else. So the question that we received is actually relevant to this idea, and it's how would you face the idea of having a new technology coming in that you're not prepared to tackle? Have you got any recommendations, any ideas on how to do that?
Gosh, I feel like, for a lot of this, people have written books about some of these things, but, thinking off the top of my head, I mean, my first place to go anytime I'm faced with something new or unfamiliar, or, I just don't get or understand, I turn to my professional community. It's, a colleague down the hall, or it is a group I belong to because of, the position Indiana University happens to have with a consortia and that sort of thing. So I will, in those cases, I am immediately trying to figure out who knows what in my local context. Do I have someone near me who knows what this is, what it's about, how to apply it, whether there are issues or concerns that we need to be asking about. Fortunately, at my institution, we've got a really robust information technology support for the university and a lot of expertise there. So, that's where I would typically start. But I also want to reach out to the people that I have grown connected to as a librarian over the years and find out from them, how's it working at your place? What are you doing with this? How is this supposed to work? I am not a technologist. This is not a part of the library that I have been very, I haven't worked much in that space, but I've always had to work with those folks in institutional repository kinds of ways, and instructional technology, that sort of thing. But I've never had to do it. So when I have to kind of know the meat of it, that's who I go to the experts. So I guess that's my off the top of my head response to that is find the people in your network or your community who may know something, and just start asking questions. Librarians are not all that different from our faculty researchers. We like to talk about what we're doing. We like to talk about how something has worked or changed our practice really positively. And so I would just say, never be afraid to ask someone, what are you doing with this? How does this work for you? Because I'm really sure they'll be very happy to talk with you and to share some of the challenges they've encountered with a new technology, for example.
And this is something that we certainly see when people come together in an event like this. It's also about building that community and getting exposed to what people are doing around the world, not just, the network that we've built for ourselves, but the people that we hear talking about examples. Just as a disclaimer for everybody, I actually found Erin because she'd given a talk about this very same topic, the future of libraries. And that's how I came in contact with her. And she was so lovely. She answered my email straight away, said she was available. And this is something personally I encounter all the time in the librarian community. People tend to be extremely nice. They tend to want to share. So I think that's valuable insight for when we feel a little bit lonely, maybe, or a little bit lost because maybe we're in a smaller institution and we don't know who to connect with. There's loads of people out there who have insights and recommendations for us. So I think, yeah, that's very precious, a precious part of the community that we're all part of. Somebody else asked an interesting question about communication. So Chad Buckley asks, have you ever experienced or heard of successful ways to communicate library budget realities and limitations to the rest of the campus?
Gosh, it's tough. In my particular context and a lot of the contexts of higher education in the United States right now, public institutions, gosh, we've got a lot going on politically. And our budgets, at our institutions have been, I would say, stressed. Some have been less stressed than others. And the ways that kind of unpacks itself for libraries can vary a little bit, but we're all in one way or another trying to figure out how to make these resources work. And I don't know, I would say two things. Depending on where you are in your organization, my dean, for example, make sure that the provost knows what's going on, right? Like, they don't talk often, and they don't talk for long, but it's essential to use the time that she has to make sure that he is aware of some of our top priorities and our top challenges. So that kind of communication is important, like at the very top. And then at the associate dean level, where we're all participating in various ways across the campus and different kinds of groups, we're constantly listening for opportunities to talk about what we're doing, but also to make sure that if something comes up that implicates the library, that we say something. And that has been the case for me a few times, particularly in the last few years after the pandemic, to make sure that there's no misconception about what the libraries are capable of doing. Now, we were able to do a lot of things as a result of the pandemic because things loosened up. I'm thinking about the Hottie resources and other resources that became available in a way that had not been previously available. But that didn't last. That wasn't a forever solution. And so hearing and listening for things where there's a misconception about what we're doing, what's available, how we can make something work. I always take those opportunities to say, well, actually, there's, something has changed here. I think it is, if you're not at the conversations where libraries are implicated budgetarily, you've got to figure out a way to get into those conversations. And maybe that's an administrative responsibility in your organization. And we've got to get to those, we've got to get to the Office of Research meetings. We've got to get to the Office of Undergraduate Education meetings. If you're a librarian, just a subject librarian or an instructional librarian, or whatever it happens to be, take the opportunities you have with the departments that you liaise with or the research centers that you liaise with. And if you don't have those liaison responsibilities, doesn't mean you can't go to things, right? Like show up to some of those places and listen to the conversation and find the opportunity to relay some of the challenges and successes that the libraries are having. It's a difficult question. I think you have to be very attuned and mindful of what's going on with your campus faculty and leadership. Timing is everything. So, your vice provost for research might be dealing with some other issue, some issue of, I don't know, a research compliance issue. And that's not the time to go in and say, hey, by the way, the amount we're paying for article processing charges in the library is out of control and we need more money. That I cannot overstate how fundamentally important it is to know what's going on your campus so that you can time your questions, your requests, the timing of the information you shared. You can do that strategically. And when your leaders and your faculty colleagues across campus are going to be most open, most available in their head to hear what you're saying. I would also say no one hears what you want them to hear maybe the first time. And if you work in an organization where you've tried to relay a piece of information like, hey, we've all got to do this thing, please do this thing, sometimes it takes 7 or 8 times of saying this before everyone hears it and everyone understands it. So I guess I would just close with saying, don't expect that the campus leadership or even your faculty colleagues on your campus to understand exactly what you're trying to convey the first time you say it. That repetition of, hey, yeah, this really still is a thing, or hey, we really are still having this challenge. Our budget isn't stretching as far as it used to. Be ready to do that on repeat, but don't not do it. Just because you have to say it a lot of times and you have to be in different places when you say it, don't let that discourage you from it. And because sometimes people just aren't ready to hear it, aren't in the space to hear it. But if you repeat it enough and you're in enough of the places to do it strategically, I think that the message does get across.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, we got a question that was related to leadership. You, Rodriguez, was asking, what do we do in case a leader doesn't believe in libraries? Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all of the questions that we received, which are so very many. And I'd like to thank the audience for being so proactive. But what you've just shared, I think, also ties back into this conversation. Communication, reiteration, emphatically, like you said in your presentation, that can definitely inspire people to believe more in what we do as well, as librarians. As I mentioned, there's a few more questions that I would love to ask you all the questions in the world and all of the questions that are getting here. But unfortunately, we only have time for one more. And I would like to read out loud the one that Nadia Homending shared, which is, how do you see balancing information and digital literacy for technology and innovation? She says there is a lot of innovation and technology insertions in the library context. However, I see students and even faculty struggling with information literacy, like weak skills for basic and advanced search. How do you approach this gap?
Oh my goodness, it's a great question, and I feel like it just seems to get more complicated and complex every, gosh, more frequently than every year for sure. And I don't know that I have the answer to this. I think within the library, we have to make sure that we're staying aware of what our current students look like, what they know, what they have experience with, how they are operating. And I tell you, the older you get, the harder this seems to me, at least for me. There We have to remain really aware of how they're engaging and working with information. And I think a lot of us have probably had the experience where a student is really talented with, navigating the web and knowing the ins and outs of how a certain kind of software works, or manipulating a kind of technology, but are lacking in some of these more kind of basic skills at understanding how to evaluate information, how to find relevant information, those basic information literacy skills. And I know that some of the work that in my libraries, what we've tried to do is work with the faculty, the instructors a little bit more, to help them understand what we're seeing in the library. The students that are coming to the reference desk, the students who are coming to some of our events. We see them in a different way, I think, than faculty and instructors do in the classroom. So being really mindful of, hey, we're seeing a lot of students ask this kind of question about, actually, I have a good example. Real uptick in the last year or so with students coming to the desk with citations and asking to find, help me find this resource. And it's not a real citation. It's a totally made up thing that came from ChatGPT or something. And we have started to talk to our faculty about this. And I think the other thing we've talked a lot with our faculty and instructors about is, just because the students seem to be really adept at, the technology, navigating the systems, doesn't mean they know how to interpret, find, evaluate good information. And I think that like I said, my institution, that seems to be getting a little bit better in terms of faculty understanding that and realizing that. But I think this is going to be an ongoing challenge. And I think it's gotten, like I said, so much more complex, particularly in the United States, with our political situations and the real divide and divisiveness of conversation. It's difficult to have conversations about how to identify information that's good information, that's factual information. So I'm sorry that I don't have a good answer for this, but I think remaining aware, staying in tune with how students are navigating this information world, making sure that we keep our skills and our tools up to date so that we are operating in similar ways that our students and researchers are, that we don't get too distant from how our campus communities are operating.
Thank you for your insights, Erin, and for the wonderful presentation. I'm reading so many fantastic comments. People are enthusiastic, and I think your passion really transpires when you talk about librarianship and the challenges that we're facing. I think it's really important to maintain that enthusiasm throughout, especially in times of challenges. We're getting to the end of our presentation. We have a few more questions, but we've received so many. I'd like to thank people again for asking them and for participating. We unfortunately don't have time to go through them now, but our contact within Jove is always open. Erin left her email in the signature as well earlier, so I'm sure if anybody wants to have a chat or dig deeper into this topic, this is why we have these sessions, to create a tighter community and to put people in contact for sure. So I would like to thank Erin Ellis again for joining us today. The presentation was wonderful. And thank you to the audience. You were fantastic and super, super warm. I couldn't be happier about how we tackled this topic and this issue together. For any more webinars, please be in touch. We're sending emails out to continue this series. This was one of many topics that we're dealing with in the next few months and in the previous months as well. You will all receive a recording of this session together with an email and a link to get more information about Jove or anything you'd like to get more information on. And so again, thank you, Erin, and it was a pleasure to have you all today.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Alice and Jove. I am grateful for the opportunity, and please reach out if I can answer any more questions or talk more about it.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely day. Bye.